Well, greetings, class, and welcome to another edition of WHAP, sponsored in part by me, your wonderful, amazing teacher. Today, we're going to be covering topic 6.4. We are trudging through Unit 6 right now. And remember, if you're seeing this video for the first time going, wait a minute, when did we get on Unit 6? The other 3 units are on this YouTube channel. And also, if you need the notes packet, you can find that on my website, which can be located on teacher websites at obhs.desotocountyschools.org. And you'll see it there to upload and print out if you can. If not, you can just type it all away on your computer as long as you have it. Because remember, the free response question, the DBQ for the AP exam, is going to be open book. So that's pretty exciting. So, well, let's get to it. We've been looking at imperialism. We've been looking at responses to imperialism on both sides. Now we're going to take it a step further and look at economic development on a global scale. So just as a refresher, again, what I'm putting up here, this is contextual information. Industrialization encourages nations to look to Asia and Africa for raw materials like cotton, copper, and rubber. America looking south for fertilizer and new markets for goods, and our colonial workers are providing very cheap labor at that time. So here's the essential question for this unit. It's the question to ponder, if you will. How did environmental factors contribute to the global economy during this time period of 1750 to 1900? How did environmental factors contribute to this? So let's move on forward and let's see what we can find out today. Well, we're going to start with some technological advancements up here. A lot of pictures, a lot of folks up here. We have discussed this before. We've discussed railroads and how colonial roads were absolutely poorly constructed. Sadly, a lot of these places in Africa, especially in Africa, are still the same today. Many of them were few. They were unusable during wet seasons. They would wash away. So the technology for travel, for transportation, was absolutely horrendously awful. So what railroads will do is that they will lower the cost of transporting goods to Europe. And so railroads are seen as an example of positive imperialism. So if you're ever asked to say, what are one of the good aspects of imperialism? Well, you can say, well, they did bring railroads, and yes, a lot of those railroads are still there in that part of the world to this very day. So that's a positive, not necessarily the best answer. Cecil Rhodes, who's pictured right here, Cecil Rhodes wanted to build the Trans-African Railway, but Great Britain never got all of the land it needed, so he took it upon himself to start the trade. Now, Rhodes is a wealthy man, gets wealthy by finding a very important resource in Africa, diamonds, a girl's best friend. He will help Britain mobilize for war because he's going to spare no expense in trying to get exactly what he wants. And he does that with railroads. Steamships. Initially, the steamships couldn't travel very far because it uses way too much coal, but it could transport people, goods, mail, and everything across rivers in Africa. So you wanted to see steamships for river travel more so than oceanic travel. But in the 1870s, ships start to become more efficient. Refrigeration makes the transport of meat possible across oceans. So no more curing it with salt. They now have available to have cold meat. That was a strange thing to say. Okay. The telegraph. I will now teach the rest of the class in Morse code. Kidding. Not going to do that. What I just did for you, though, is show you how a telegraph works. Makes communication instantaneous. It's like Gilded Age version of text messaging. By 1874, the entire world, was connected with telegraph lines, transoceanic lines. The transatlantic cable is going to be laid, and so through Morse code, the system I just showed you that represents down the transatlantic cable represents basically it's a short in the wire, so you can receive messages. So telegraphs a pretty big technological advancement. Feel free to stop the video anytime to take notes in your note packet about any of this, and we will continue on. We're going to look at now raw materials. I want to turn the attention over to raw materials. The demand for raw materials that can be processed in factories and shipped away for purchase, usually back to the mother country, it turns colonies into export colonies. Cotton and rubber, these are the two I want to focus on because they involve colonies that were established in order to get this material. Cotton. Well, Great Britain bans Indian cotton in 1721 and instead gets their cotton from the United States, the South, South Carolina and Georgia and the southern states. Well, the Civil War, the American Civil War, halts all this cotton production because, war. And Egypt and India are going to benefit because now they're going to try to control the market on all this. By the end of the 19th century, 93% of Egypt's export revenue came from cotton. You don't usually think about Egypt being a cotton-producing nation, but as you can see, they are, and they're going to benefit from the American Civil War, albeit indirectly, because they've had long traditions of cotton production. Rubber. In 1839, a guy named Charles Goodyear created the process of vulcanization. And that is where you get the modern rubber. And now when I'm saying vulcanized rubber, look no further than the tires that are on yours or your parents' vehicle. That is vulcanized rubber. And this is very, very important to industrialization. So let me tell you why. Rubber is native to Amazon, not Amazon.com, but the Amazon region and in South America. And they can't keep up with demand. So what Britain does is they take tree seeds to Sri Lanka and Singapore, and they clear hundreds and hundreds of acres to plant rubber trees. And yes, here's a newsflash, rubber grows on trees. Vulcanization is a different process by making the rubber that we know today. Rubber barons, I like that. We, in American history, you're going to learn about a group of people called robber barons, and they're actually pictured up here, and that was just a way to say the fat and wealthy money grubbers that controlled the economy. I'm calling these folks rubber barons. They're the ones that run the rubber tree farms, and what they're going to do is they're going to force the indigenous people into slavery to produce all of this rubber, and it's going to become an absolutely terrifying thing. We talked in an earlier video, I showed you King Leopold of Belgium. He's one of the ones that did that. So, and the conditions are absolutely, absolutely brutal. So as we move along and into raw materials, let's talk about a couple of more. Palm oil. Palm oil, which keeps machines in factories lubricated. Candles. This originates in West Africa. It's so important that it was actually used as currency. It was actually used as a form of monetary exchange, as money. So that means it's a cash crop and farmed by prisoners of tribal war. You see palm plantations in Malaya and in Indonesia, or what was then known as the Dutch East Indies, coming out. Ivory, ivory is known for its its beauty and its durability. You can make all kinds of things of ivory, piano keys, pool balls, knife handles, etc. The Ivory Coast in Africa, also known on a map as Côte d'Ivoire, is where France sets up trading posts for ivory and slaves, and that is a country with that same name today. They don't have any of that, but that's where they got that name from, the Ivory Coast. Minerals. Mineral ore is used in manufacturing, and I put $3 signs right there because that means big money. This is big money. In Mexico, silver. In Chile, Rhodesia, this is in Africa. The Belgian Congo, copper for electrical cables and power lines. The electrical power that's powering your light in your room right now is running through a copper wire. Tin, used for food storage. Tin in Bolivia, Nigeria, Malaya. Australia, South America, all these places use these kinds of minerals, and this is where you could find all of them. And lastly, diamonds. Cecil Rhodes, I mentioned this, the De Beers Jewelry Company, that's what it's called now. It's the De Beers Mining Company back then. 90%, they had a monopoly on this. They mined 90% of the world's diamonds by 1880. And Rhodes becomes the most powerful man in South Africa by the ripe old age of 29. And in 1890, he will become the Prime Minister of the Cape Colony, today known as South Africa. and roads that will lay the seeds down for racist policies that will lead to segregation, or as we know it in that part of the world as apartheid. So see how everything just kind of jumps off the previous thing. So very, very unfortunate that happened. Stop the video here if you need to take notes. And so let's move on now to our final slide for this topic, and that's agricultural products. Most African, Southeast Asian, and Latin American economies were agricultural. So you see them take part in something known as subsistence farming. Tea, cotton, sugar, rubber, palm oil, all that grown for commercial value. And the subject nations, the nations that are subjugated by the colonies, they stop growing as much food, and so you see food prices rise. In Argentina, Brazil, and Uruguay, these are in South America, you can see cattle are being raised for meat in the middle class part of that. Peru and Chile mined guano to be used as fertilizer. I invite you to Google that. So here's the consequences of all this. Local food production is replaced by cash crops, and that's going to lead to something known as monocultures. Monocultures means there is no agricultural diversity whatsoever. The soil is depleted, crop disease and pests are spread. Former colonies have struggled to diversify their land because now they have to import agricultural needs and are still dependent on more developed nations. So again, this is all about it's not really all about independence as much as it is about interdependent. And what I mean by that is that a lot of these places, especially the mother countries, the imperials, the Frances, the Spains, the Great Britons, the US's, are now dependent on their colonies to further their needs in order to gain money and power. And what happens with that? Guess what? The rise in nationalism. A big rise in nationalism is going to occur. So anyway, so that's topic 6.4, and I'm going to invite you to see my buddy Steve Heimler's video. Again, the link is right up here or there, somewhere up there, just to kind of review 6.4, and I will see you all in the next video in the next couple of days. Hope you're doing well. Please take care of yourself.